at 7.
This week on CBS News 24/7, all-day coverage of the Democratic National Convention with special editions of America Decides and the Daily Report with John Dickerson, and followed by complete coverage from the CBS News political team live from Chicago. Stream all-day coverage this week here on CBS News.
Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm John Dickerson in Chicago on the fourth and final day of the Democratic National Convention. After 3 consecutive nights of speeches, spectacle, and celebrity, Democrats are ready to receive the person around which all of that has swirled. Tonight, Vice President Kamala Harris will formally accept the Democratic nomination for president. She will be the first woman of color to lead a major political party's ticket, 52 years after New York Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm became the first woman of color to seek a major party's nomination. Harris's path to this moment didn't start until exactly 1 month ago yesterday, when President Biden dropped out of the race. Now, with his support and an energized base before her, Kamala Harris will take the torch passed down by the outgoing commander-in-chief. Running by her side is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who last night introduced himself to a national audience. The former football coach rallied the crowd for the 2.5-month sprint to Election Day.
Look, we got 76 days. That's nothing. There'll be time to sleep when you're dead. We're going to leave it on the field.
CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang always leaves it on the field, and she joins me now. Weijia, it's good to see you. It's been fun spending these last few days with you. All right, so what are we expecting?
All right, so we have learned that she has 3 main objectives for tonight, for the biggest political speech of her life. And she wants to focus on sharing her personal story, talking about coming from a middle-class family, being raised by a working mother, working at McDonald's. These are a lot of the themes that we've already heard, but we expect that she will build on it even more. She will draw a contrast between her and former President Donald Trump, and we've already seen the framing of this, right? She's going to present options of joy versus darkness in a campaign of grievances. And then she's going to talk about her patriotism and her love for this country and how that shapes her vision for the future. She will talk about how, she believes because she is in this country, was raised here, that she had many opportunities that she might otherwise not have had. And on my way to you, I ran into one of her senior aides. That's the beauty of conventions, right? Yeah. There are sources everywhere who said she's been holed up in her hotel room all day. She's making final edits with her advisors and speechwriters, really, line by line, because this is such a huge moment for her.
Yes, a huge moment in a string of huge moments from basically now until Election Day. Okay, so what's the next? What is she going to do next? She'll presumably be catapulted out of here. Then what?
Well, we don't have her schedule yet, but it's not going to be difficult to guess what she's going to do. And that's hit the road again, because she has not had that much time. To your point, all of this was thrust upon her just 1 month ago. And so she has said time and time again that she believes she is the underdog, despite what polling says. So she wants to spend as much time as possible, especially in battleground states, to try to connect with voters. And she, doesn't have that much time, so I expect that she'll be using it a lot to campaign.
Of the 4,700 delegates here, there are 30 that are that represent the uncommitted movement, and they would like to see somebody at the podium speak to their position, which is disappointment with the administration position on Gaza. Nobody's going to be speaking from the podium. What's the campaign saying about that?
So the National Uncommitted Movement actually asked for time themselves at the podium after we heard from the parents of an Israeli-American hostage yesterday. They announced that they were denied that time. And, that was not good for the vice president, who has tried tonally to distinguish herself from President Biden and the administration's policies. Her national security team has said, just go back and listen to her speeches. She's been a lot more aggressive when it comes to calling for a ceasefire. She did so before the president. She has used language that really sends a message to Israel. But, John, that is just language. And they are looking for clear policy changes and shifts that haven't come yet. And so this is a vulnerable spot for her because, the largest Arab American population is in the critical battleground state of Michigan. And it's not just about that. When you look at young voters and what matters to them, they have expressed that this issue matters. And so they are watching her like a hawk. They expect some kind of progress on this, and they feel disappointed that so far that hasn't come.
White House correspondent Weijia Zhang. Thanks, Weijia. And let's now go back to New York City to my colleague, Lindsay Reiser, from our studio up there. Lindsay, you got the rest of the highlights from today, including Trump's visit to the border.
Yeah, before we get there, though, Walz's comment, sleep when you're dead, that was for elected officials, volunteers, and journalists, right, John?
Right, it is. But, I don't know, we're, in this modern age where we're all concerned about our mental health, I don't know if that message is exactly going to, is what we should be telling our kids. Just, as a parent, that makes me a little nervous.
That's fair. They've got the apps. They've got Headspace and Calm. They're in good hands. Thanks, John. We'll see you back here later this hour. As John mentioned, former President Donald Trump campaigned at the U.S. southern border in Arizona today. It's his third visit to the border during the election cycle, but his first time doing so from Arizona, of course, a key battleground state. During his visit, he criticized his opponent, Kamala Harris, pinning the Biden administration's border policies on her.
For nearly 4 years, as border czar, Comrade Kamala has overseen a nation-wrecking border invasion.
CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey Burns is traveling with the former president in Montezuma Pass, Arizona. Caitlin, we heard a little bit from Trump attacking Harris. What else did he say today?
Hey, good to see you, Lindsay. Well, this was an explicit move by the Trump campaign to try to pin border policy to his opponent, Kamala Harris. He came down to the border today, as you mentioned, and he was flanked by Border Patrol officials and also family members of people who had been killed by undocumented immigrants. And this is all to make a point that border security is a top issue in his campaign. His campaign says the economy and the border will be the defining issues of this campaign. And when you look at our polling, for those voters who say that those are their top issues, they are supporting Donald Trump. And you look at our polling, and the vast majority of Republicans say that this is a top issue for them. So he essentially is trying to attach all of the issues with the border crisis to Kamala Harris, calling her the border czar. Now, Kamala Harris was tasked by President Biden to oversee the root causes of immigration in Central America. She was not specifically tasked with addressing the border crisis. And so, however, this has become an issue for the Trump campaign to capitalize on, and they're trying to kind of seize the spotlight as Kamala Harris prepares to deliver her address, accepting the Democratic Party nomination tonight.
Trump was pressed by reporters on that bipartisan Senate immigration bill earlier this year. He urged many of his colleagues on the Hill to not support it. What did he say about that today?
That's right. He essentially said that he didn't like this bill and he wanted Biden to just shut down the border unilaterally. But remember, Lindsay, this was a bipartisan bill. Senator Lankford of Oklahoma was a key figure in this, a top conservative Republican. And Democrats had said that this was some of the most conservative border policy that they had seen. But Trump had urged Republicans to not support it. And a lot of criticism was aimed at Trump for wanting to kill a border deal in an election year to sort of make this an issue. That was the accusation. But today he said that he didn't like the bill. It's important to note, though, Lindsay, that back in June, President Biden did issue an executive order that essentially cracked down on asylum claims. That earned him the ire of some progressive Democrats, but he did take executive action there. And we should also note, Lindsay, that border crossings have been significantly down, and that's due in part to that executive order, due in part to the Mexican government taking action. And as I'm standing here in these really hot temperatures, that also has led to the decrease in border crossings.
How is Trump planning to counter Harris's big moment tonight?
Well, he told us today that he is going to issue statements on his social media platform, Truth Social. So I suppose we should look for reaction there. But as she is preparing to accept her party's nomination, former President Trump is talking a lot still about President Biden. He essentially has been calling Kamala Harris taking the nomination as a coup, which is, not true. It's perfectly under the, prerogative of the Democrats to do so. And of course, Biden is still the president. But you can tell, Lindsay, that this campaign had been oriented around opposing President Biden, that was their opponent for this campaign. Spent a lot of money doing that. And you can tell that the former president is still aggrieved that Biden is not his opponent, because the polls are tightening, especially in those key battleground states like here in Arizona.
Caitlin Huey-Burns in Montezuma Pass, where it looks much cooler than it is with that breeze. I know all too well from my summers in my home state. It's like a hair dryer on your face. All right, Stay cool. We're going to have more on Trump's visit to the U.S. southern border and how immigration is impacting the election with our Camilo Montoya Galvez coming up later this hour. The Arkansas Supreme Court has blocked an abortion rights measure from appearing on the state's ballot in November, upholding a previous decision. Last month, a judge rejected signed petitions for the initiative, saying that activists pushing for the measure failed to file the necessary paperwork. After an appeal, the state Supreme Court upheld that ruling today. It means that Arkansas voters will not be able to weigh in on the state's near total abortion ban. The current law in Arkansas does not provide exceptions for cases of rape, incest, or fatal fetal anomalies. The Supreme Court has temporarily reinstated part of an Arizona law that requires people who are registering to vote to show proof of citizenship. However, other parts of the law have not been reinstated. Those include a requirement that people provide proof of citizenship to cast a ballot or vote by mail. The case is set to continue to play out in lower courts. Now to an update on an international election we've been following. Venezuela's Supreme Court has certified President Nicolas Maduro's re-election. Maduro requested the audit after he declared victory in the July 28th vote. The opposition party has said Maduro rigged the election and that their candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, beat Maduro. The U.S. has also recognized Gonzalez as the winner of the election. Critics say the country's Supreme Court is full of Maduro loyalists who have not previously ruled against him. The U.S. resumed Gaza ceasefire and hostage release talks in Cairo today. President Biden's top Middle East advisor participated as part of the American delegation with Egypt and Israel. Despite those talks, the Israeli military has been carrying out strikes in Gaza. Palestinian officials say at least 16 people were killed across the Strip Thursday. An Israeli drone strike also killed 3 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli army says it targeted a group of armed men that posed a danger to the IDF. Mexico isn't holding up its end of an 80-year-old bargain with the U.S. We'll talk to a climate expert on how Texas could be paying the price. Plus, there's a new non-hormonal drug to treat hot flashes caused by menopause. How the treatment could bring relief to millions of women. You're streaming The Daily Report.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America. Weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I use sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
The
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
The Canadian government is ordering the country's 2 major freight railroads to engage in binding arbitration to resolve a labor dispute that has led to a temporary shutdown of both railways. At a press conference earlier today, Canada's Labour Minister asked the Canadian Industrial Relations Board to order the railways to resume operations. They would do so under the current collective agreements until a new labor agreement could be made. The Labour Minister deemed arbitration necessary, saying that there was no signs that a labor agreement could be reached.
We have an impasse here. We wanted to give these negotiations the absolute possibility of concluding successfully. We see little prospect of that.
The economic impact of the railway shutdown could have cost Canada more than $250 million per day and impacted the rest of North America. Imports of goods like wheat, fertilizer, and meat would be held up until the railways came to an agreement, but it looks like crisis is averted for now. Russia and Ukraine both claimed battleground victories today as war in the region wages on. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his troops seized control of a village in the Kursk region of western Russia, the same area Kyiv launched an incursion more than 2 weeks ago. The Kremlin also claimed a Ukrainian drone attack sunk a ferry in Russia's southern port. Ukraine has not commented on that attack. Russia, meanwhile, says its troops are advancing further into eastern Ukraine. Moscow says it has seized control of a village in the Donetsk region. Troops there are now roughly 6 miles from the town of Pokrovsk, a major Ukrainian transport hub. Ukraine has started evacuating people in that area. Italian prosecutors have opened a formal investigation into the sinking of that luxury yacht earlier this week. The owner of the company that built the boat is blaming the incident on human error, saying that a guard should have been watching out for any incoming storms. The yacht sank early Monday morning after being struck with violent weather. 15 of the 22 people on board escaped and were later rescued. Emergency crews have since recovered 6 bodies, including those of British tech tycoon Mike Lynch, who owned the super yacht, as well as an American couple. 1 body remains missing. A former Las Vegas lawmaker took to the stand for the second time in his own defense today for his trial in the murder of a local journalist. Prosecutors are accusing Robert Tellis of killing Jeff Gehrman in September of 2022. Gehrman, who worked for the Las Vegas Review-Journal at the time of his death, wrote critical articles about Tellis and his workplace conduct. Tellis has denied the accusations, claiming he has been framed.
I knew I didn't do this thing, and yet the police claim they have this evidence. They did what they did to me. I'm not guilty. I didn't kill Mr. Gehrman.
Gehrman spent 44 years covering Las Vegas organized crime and public officials. The trial is expected to wrap up by Friday. Pharmaceutical giant Bayer says it has developed a new drug to treat hot flashes and other symptoms linked to menopause, all without the use of hormones. Clinical trials of elinzanetant, which looked at hundreds of postmenopausal women, showed the drug lowered the frequency of hot flashes by 56% after the first month. That increased to 65% after 3 months. In the United States, menopause on average typically begins for women when they're 51 or 52. About 5% of women experience early menopause between the ages of 40 and 45. As many as 80% of women face hot flashes as they age into their 40s and 50s. For more on this, Dr. Stephanie Fabian joins me now. She's the director of the Mayo Clinic Center for Women's Health and medical director for the North American Menopause Society. Doctor, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
How encouraging is this data?
Well, this is just amazing. It's great that women have another option for management of hot flashes, and especially for those women who can't or don't want to use hormone therapy, we have a new, great non-hormonal option.
So there are other non-hormonal treatments approved by the FDA to treat menopause. Once approved, how could this be different from what's already on the market?
Well, this would be different because as opposed to the other NK3 inhibitor, fezolinetant, that was approved last year, this targets two different receptors, the NK1 and the NK3 receptors. And we think the NK1 receptor may have a role in sleep. So this drug seems to have improvements in not only hot flashes, but it improves sleep as well, and also seems to improve menopause-related quality of life.
I mean, that is so huge for so many women who go into menopause. Their sleep quality just takes a nosedive. Are there any potential side effects with this new medication from Bayer?
There was a slight increased risk of headache and of fatigue, but in general, it was very well tolerated.
What are you telling your patients when it comes to access to these drugs? Are they going to be covered by insurance?
You know, this has been a little bit of a problem that we saw initially with fezolinetant. So this is still a concern that insurance companies may have women try one or even two different non-hormonal medications before they can get to this drug. So yes, that remains a concern. We really want to see the women that will benefit most from this drug able to receive it and able to afford it. So this is a concern.
How big of a game changer is this medication? And doctor, just the fact that we're talking about this. I mean, this will impact every other person on the planet. And that this is really something that as a society, we don't talk often enough about.
100% true, but just look back. We had an ad in the Super Bowl for fezolinetant. So this is now mainstream enough for us to be talking about it in the Super Bowl. But you're right, it affects over 50% of the world's population and can really impact quality of life. It's a huge expense, not only for women, but also medical costs and societal costs of lost work productivity. So it's a big deal.
Dr. Stephanie Fabian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
The Food and Drug Administration has approved an updated round of COVID-19 vaccines. The new vaccines are designed to counter multiple COVID-19 variants that are circulating. Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines will begin shipping right away, while Novavax says it will release its vaccine at a later date. The CDC recommends adults and children as young as 6 months old get the shot this fall. The agency notes anyone who has recently contracted COVID-19 can wait 3 months after their recovery to get vaccinated. Home sales in the U.S. rose slightly last month. Sales of previously owned homes were up 1.3% in July compared to June. That's the first gain in 4 months. However, sales were 2.5% lower compared to the same time last year. A recent decline in mortgage rates has played a role in boosting those sales. According to Freddie Mac, the average rate on a 30-year mortgage is currently under 6.5%. That's a little less than 1% what it was a year ago. Coming up, Donald Trump was at the border today. We'll fact-check some of his claims about Kamala Harris on immigration. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Going our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Here are some additions to our top stories. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is now the official Democratic candidate for vice president. Walz accepted the nomination on stage last night at the DNC, saying it was the honor of his life. Looking forward, he drew on his experience as a high school football coach, comparing the final weeks before Election Day to the final minutes of a game. Before Walz took the stage, Democratic political powerhouses, including former President Clinton, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, and more, gave their own speeches in support of the Harris-Walz ticket, calling for a new path forward for America. But tonight, Vice President Kamala Harris will be the star. She is set to officially accept the nomination to close out the 4-day convention. According to her campaign, Harris's speech will cover her background, how her vision differs from former President Donald Trump's, and optimism for the American people. Trump was in Arizona Thursday visiting the U.S. southern border, focusing his campaign on one of the top issues for many voters in this election, immigration, and what he characterizes as the failures of the Biden administration's open border policies. He specifically called out Harris.
She is a radical left Marxist. She wants open borders. She wants our country. I don't understand why anybody would want it, but she wants our country to be open to the world's criminals, so they can come in and rape and pillage and do whatever they have to do.
CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez joins me now. Camilo, can you clarify for us what Harris's role on immigration actually is and whether Trump is accurately describing her policies in the clip we just heard?
Hi, Lindsay. Yes, despite the fact that Republicans and former President Donald Trump have branded Vice President Harris as the border czar for the Biden administration, she was actually assigned to a more precise role, and that was to address poverty, violence, and other root causes of migration from Central America, specifically from three countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. And that has been a diplomatic role that she has undertaken. She has not been tasked with overseeing U.S. border immigration or in border enforcement. And so that is very important to underscore. That is not to say that her role should not be criticized, but it is important, Lindsay, to clarify what her actual responsibilities are and what they are not on immigration. And in terms of how former President Donald Trump is characterizing her positions on immigration, yes, they have starkly different agendas on border security and immigration, and you can certainly have policy disagreements with how the Biden administration, Lindsay, has handled the humanitarian crisis here at the border, but the Biden-Harris administration has never implemented an open borders policy. Yes, Customs and Border Protection has reported a record 8 million migrant encounters along the border during President Biden's presidency, but 4 million of those migrants have been released into the U.S., and other 4 million people have been deported, expelled, or returned to Mexico or to their home countries. So not everyone has been allowed to stay under the Biden administration. In fact, those deportations and expulsions, Lindsay, have been increasing since the start of the summer when President Biden issued that sweeping executive action on asylum that has made most migrants here ineligible for humanitarian protection and eligible to be much more quickly deported to Mexico or to their home countries. We actually went to Nogales, Mexico earlier this morning, and we witnessed some of those deportations. So there are a lot of migrants who are currently being deported, and Vice President Harris's campaign manager told me that she is likely to continue that policy if elected.
What specifics did Trump put forth today regarding his border agenda?
Well, former President Donald Trump came here to the Arizona-Mexico border to really focus on an issue that, as you know, has been central to his political career and that he believes will also propel him back to the White House. He has promised a radical shift in U.S. immigration policy by pledging to conduct the largest deportation in U.S. history, Lindsay, to implement ideological screenings on legal immigrants, to militarize the U.S.-Mexico border by deploying the National Guard here, and also to try to terminate birthright citizenship for the children of undocumented children. And specifically today, Lindsay, he promised to increase penalties, criminal penalties, that is, for human traffickers, drug smugglers, and also human smugglers. So again, he is trying to make sure that his hardline immigration agenda is something that continues to be a key policy issue in this election.
Yeah, you have to wonder if some of those will pass the Supreme Court, like removing birthright citizenship rights. I want to ask you, you mentioned border crossings have decreased significantly since peaking in December 2023, yet it is still the biggest factor for Republican voters in a recent CBS News poll, even more than the economy. When it comes to Trump's messaging on the border, does that appeal only to his base, or do they also speak to the larger electorate?
Well, we know that poll after poll has indicated that this issue, immigration, particularly here at the U.S.-Mexico border, is a top concern for many American voters. But we have also seen that those same polls show that it's mostly a major concern among Republican and independent voters. And so, yes, the Vice President Harris is trying to, in many ways, take a more centrist stance on this issue, knowing that it could be a major political challenge for her. And you have seen at the DNC, Democrats embrace tougher border security measures, and the vice president trying to portray herself as a champion of border security, highlighting her role as a prosecutor who went after transnational gang members and human traffickers. But again, for former President Donald Trump, this is something that he believes will again catapult him to the White House, because the polls do indicate, Lindsay, that voters are more likely to trust Trump and Republicans as it relates to border security than they are to trust Democrats and Harris on this issue.
Camila Montoya Galvez, thank you so much for your reporting. We're following another story along the southern border, specifically in Texas. 80 years ago, the United States and Mexico signed a treaty that would have the two countries trade large amounts of water for regions in need. But Mexico was falling behind on its side of the bargain. Every 5 years, Mexico is required to send 1.75 million acre-feet of water to the U.S. It's only sent 400,000 for this cycle so far, or about 23%. Mexico has until October 2025 to fulfill the requirement, but experts say it's unlikely the country will be able to meet that. It's an important deal for both countries. Mexican border states seen on this map are heavily reliant on water from the American side of the Colorado River, while some water from Mexico's side gets sent to parts of Texas, where it's used by cities and for agricultural activities. But with Mexico not fulfilling its end of the water deal, Texas is beginning to feel the effects. John Nielsen-Gammon joins me now to explain this issue. He is a Regents Professor of Atmospheric Sciences at Texas A&M University and serves as the Texas State Climatologist. John, good to have you.
Good to be here.
We mentioned agriculture in Texas. Can you tell us more about how this lack of water, what kind of problems it's causing for your state?
Yeah, the lower valley, which includes cities like Brownsville, McAllen, Hidalgo, that whole region is a important farming area for the state of Texas, where a large portion of the Texas citrus crop is grown, a lot of grapefruit production and so forth. And most of that area is irrigated and relies on water from the Rio Grande, which includes water from the United States and Mexico. And unfortunately, in combination of drought and lack of water deliveries, there have been cutbacks on acreage planted. We've actually seen the last sugarcane refinery plant in the lower valley close earlier this year because it was no longer enough crop to make production viable there.
Wow, where else do Texans get their water?
Well, in most of the state, it's rivers that are primarily within the state of Texas. The area along the U.S.-Mexico border is includes cities like Laredo and other cities that I've mentioned are reliant on the Rio Grande. The state as a whole gets water both from underground sources and from the other rivers. Along the border, there's no other river that can be relied upon. So alternative sources are potentially groundwater sources, although some of that groundwater is what we call brackish, and so it would need to be desalinated for it to become drinkable.
What's keeping Mexico from holding up their end of the deal?
Well, Mexico has a large area of irrigated farming in the state of Chihuahua. And at one point, a couple of years back, they tried to release some water from the reservoirs in the area, and the dams actually got taken over by farmers who refused to allow that to happen. So it's basically a conflict between what the Mexico is obligated to provide and what's presently being relied upon by the farmers in that region, who right now Mexico basically has the choice between meeting their treaty obligations and the course of that, starving out the nascent industry of agriculture that's in the state of Chihuahua.
So what happens if Mexico is unable to fulfill their end of the bargain? I mean, are there any solutions? What is Texas looking at? You mentioned groundwater that would need to be salinated.
Yeah, that's one possibility. Another, I mean, it'd be useful if right now the treaty's on a 5-year cycle, so they have to deliver a certain amount of water every 5 years, and they're behind pace to do that. They say that they're going to meet their obligations by the end of the 5-year period, which is in October of 2025. But of course, it's hard to count on that when there's not even enough water in their reservoirs to be able to provide that, even if they cut off water from their own sources. So it'd be great for Texans to rely more on water delivery on an annual basis or perhaps a biennial basis, so that you wouldn't have these large deficits that build up during the 5-year cycle that have to be made up for at the last minute. Sometimes that actually does happen. Sometimes a massive hurricane can come in and dump a lot of water in, and they can meet their obligation. But we can't count on that sort of thing happening.
I got to be quick with you because we're out of time. But is there anything in the treaty that says what happens if one of the parties doesn't hold up their side?
No, I don't believe there's any official penalties for doing that, but it's certainly going to complicate international relations if it happens.
John Nielsen-Gammon, thank you.
You're welcome.
Parts of Texas are also facing extreme heat alerts before entering the weekend. For more, here's Mike Bettis from our partners at the Weather Channel.
A lot of weather stories playing out across the country right now. That heat, though, it is the mainstay. We've got excessive heat warnings, heat advisories, especially located here in Texas, where places like Austin, San Antonio, Abilene will go well north of 100 degrees. Abilene could set a record high on Friday of 108, crushing your old record. Take a look at Del Rio, 107. That'll break a record for you that you've held for more than 100 years. Very intense heat. Make sure you're finding some air conditioning. Also, some storms for us across the mountains, the Intermountain West, as well as the plains. Hail and high winds could be a possibility here. And watching for the potential for some flash flooding as well here in the Four Corners. Could be the Grand Canyon, could be Grand Junction, could be up into Wyoming, and then, of course, across the plains as well, and maybe north of I-90. Now, in the tropics, watching the Pacific, because this is a tropical system here. We've got a depression that could be aiming its way toward Hawaii, and over the weekend, we could be feeling the effects. Right now, the most likely track is south of the Big Island here, but it could produce some big wind and rain, especially on the windward side of the islands, and it may actually even increase our chances for some wildfires as well. And for more coverage, you can watch the Weather Channel on cable and live on your favorite TV streaming device.
Mike Bettis, thank you. Still to come, celebrities made their mark on both the DNC and RNC, but what's the actual impact of star power on elections? We'll discuss that ahead. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Dozens of celebrities have been appearing in Chicago this week for the Democratic National Convention. We've seen Lil Jon, Common, Oprah, Mindy Kaling, Patti LaBelle, all just to name a few. And we also saw some star power at the RNC in Milwaukee last month. Kid Rock introduced Donald Trump. We saw appearances from Hulk Hogan, Russell Brand, Jason Aldean, to name a few. So how powerful is the role of celebrity in endorsing a candidate? Dr. Melvin Williams joins us here in studio to talk about this. He's an associate professor of communication and media studies at Pace University here in New York. Doctor, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I am very interested in this topic. Historically, what has the role of celebrity been in U.S. elections and pop culture and celebrity engagement? Have we seen it for a while, many cycles now?
Absolutely. Throughout American history, political candidates and parties alike have utilized celebrities as a mechanism to boost candidate profiles, to garner voter support. We certainly have witnessed increased celebrity visibility over the past 20 years. We had the disastrous 2004 Vote or Die campaign. Obviously, celebrities were in the 2008, 2012 electing Barack Obama. 2016, a reality television star won the presidency. 2020 celebrities were there, and now we're in 2024 with an influx of celebrities attempting to assist these candidates in reaching targeted demographics.
And an influx of influencers. That's also something different about this cycle. Why is it that the DNC particularly has been tapping the TikTok stars? Who were they going for?
They are going for Generation Z, consistent with American politics. We are seeing politicians targeting the youngest voting demographic, which is Generation Z. However, Lindsay, it's very important to note that that's not enough. Generation Z is different. They are issue-driven. They care about political information accuracy, and they have been flooded with influencer and celebrity culture. So they are not as easily convinced that these people, speaking directly to influencers, know what they're talking about and are true experts on political topics.
When we're sort of looking at some of the performances we saw in the DNC and appearances and the RNC, there's been a lot of talk on social media about this. But has there sort of been a sense historically that people in Hollywood who tend to elevate conservative voices and support those kind of candidates are sort of shamed for it and get blacklisted for it?
Well, we have witnessed, obviously, instances where certain celebrities have been chastised for their views, and my stance on it is very clear. Celebrities are American citizens who have the fundamental right to vote. They should be able to vote freely and without judgment, as you and I do, because they are celebrities, but they are citizens at the end of the day, and I don't think anyone should be canceled for exercising their right to vote.
Can an Oprah,
yes,
a Beyonce, a Taylor Swift,
yes,
swing an election?
No. They haven't in the past. Taylor Swift didn't do so in 2018. Beyonce performed for Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton didn't win that election. Oprah Winfrey has been an outspoken supporter of some Democratic candidates. It ultimately comes down to the candidate. You don't want the star power to oversee or overshadow the political power and the message of the candidate. The candidate matters just as much as the celebrity, and I would say the candidate matters more.
We have been talking about celebrity endorsements. Fake endorsements have become an issue. Some of these deep fakes, AI. On Sunday, Trump shared an AI-generated image that showed support from Taylor Swift fans. There's been a now debunked image of Ryan Reynolds, who appeared to show support for Harris. That's been proven fake. How big of an issue is this, and how do people differentiate what's real from what's not?
This is a huge issue and a quite dangerous issue to democracy, because we're seeing citizens being manipulated through the levers of digital media to deceive the American people. We should all be very disturbed by this, and I'm glad that it was debunked. However, unfortunately, a lot of these media platforms, particularly digital media platforms, they are unregulated. So, you know, aside from a cease and desist here and there, the celebrity really doesn't have a lot of power.
And somebody may see this and not see the debunking. It may have already, you know, had the message, done what it was intended. Dr. Melvin Williams, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation.
Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Well, it's common to get mail for someone who lived at your address before you. It's uncommon when the recipient may have lived there more than a century ago. A 121-year-old postcard was received last week by a building society office in Wales. The postcard was dated August 3rd, 1903. Its authenticity is supported by a King Edward VII stamp. Now, the card was addressed to Miss Lydia Davies, who may have been a previous resident. The building's current occupants are hoping social media sleuths can reveal more about the very late postage. The Democratic National Convention comes to a close tonight. Coming up, we'll check back in with John Dickerson on what to look for ahead of Vice President Kamala Harris's keynote address. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The fourth and final night of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Tonight, after 3 consecutive days of appearances from A-list celebrities and some of the biggest names in the Democratic Party, Vice President Kamala Harris will take the stage and formally accept her party's nomination for president. We're back with John Dickerson at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. John, it's the last night. What are you watching for?
Well, Lindsay, first is just as a human matter. This is an enormous night for the nominee Kamala Harris in a very fast march of the last month. Candidates usually get a chance to get their bearings and their pace before this enormous night. Kamala Harris has barely had time to get her breath, and it won't stop after she finishes speaking. Then the pace will continue on and on and on every day, and then, of course, the debate and to the finish line. So just from a human standpoint, this is going to be an extraordinary moment and a long number of them. A couple of other things I'm looking for tonight. What's the one thing people take home in their pocket from the nominee? Franklin Roosevelt at his acceptance speech talked about the New Deal. John Kennedy talked about the new frontier. Is there something, a word or phrase that comes to define the Harris candidacy? Then I'm wondering how and if she's going to continue a theme we've heard from a lot of speakers, Governor Walz, Barack Obama, Oprah, Bill Clinton, which is to say, if you disagree with somebody, that doesn't make them a bad person. Extend them grace. Expanding the party, seeking people who are either Republicans or might not normally vote for a Democrat. That's the kind of human approach to a larger part of the electorate. Then there's also a policy part of that. This is not going to have a lot of policy in this speech. But are there going to be some things, for example, Governor Walz talked about his skill with a rifle, or with a shotgun, I should say. Is there going to be anything like that, a policy or something that suggests to people that the Harris administration is going to have a set of policies and ideas that are going to be a little broader across the spectrum? These are efforts to fill out the biography of a candidate who is not well known throughout the nation, or at least not as well known certainly as her opponent. And so I'm looking to see both the human message to a larger constituency, but then also if there's any possible policy to hang that definition of the candidate on. And then, of course, we'll have the sprint to the finish, and it'll be a fascinating campaign.
John, anybody buzzing there tonight about any potential surprises?
I mean, the buzzing is going on. Name someone famous from Beyonce to Taylor Swift. The only thing people haven't done is talk about the reincarnation of anyone. I mean, it's getting pretty absurd, the number of rumors that are zooming around. So at the moment, though, they are all just rumors. And by the way, it's not necessarily the greatest thing in the world to have a stratospheric star show up at your big night for yourself, because while, of course, it may lift you in terms of getting everybody to pay attention, the superstar may be the only thing they pay attention to. There have been plenty of stars here at this convention. Now it's the opportunity for the candidate to step into the spotlight. So there's a downside to having a big star.
Yeah, we were just talking about that in a previous segment. You don't want to outshine the star. John Dickerson in Chicago. If there's a reincarnation, well, that just throws out the rest of the rundowns tonight. John, thank you.
Thanks, Salty.
And thank you for watching. A special edition of America Decides is after the break. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
Have you
What's your response?
What happened? Why?
Why?
It's time for the CBS